So today we're going to be focusing on utilizing AI in the job search. And AI obviously covers a whole range of different things, but what I'm going to be focusing on, just as an example, would be the ChatGPT version of AI that's out there right now. And just covering a few things that can be helpful as part of the process of your job search that integrates this, not new technology, but growing technology that's out there. So I'm Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn's Career Services. I oversee the two graduate teams. I want to assure you that I am not actually an AI because, it's difficult to say in this world that we live in. I do this test every day, and as you can see, I pass it very easily. I'm not sure what this test is trying to get at, but I am definitely not a robot. So the advice I'm going to give you is certainly going to be from the human perspective using these tools. The ones, as I said, I'm going to be focusing on today, just as an example, will be ChatGPT, but it's the free version, right? Not the expensive one that's fancier or the one that's more up to date or the one that gains access to different things, just the free stuff. There's no need to pay anyone any money at this point in time for the way that I'm going to be suggesting that we use these tools, or that you can use these tools. So ChatGPT, our main one. DALL-E obviously is the image one that they have associated with that. So I always like to play around with these tools, and I did ask DALL-E what ChatGPT would look like as a futuristic humanoid if we would have to deal with ChatGPT as a futuristic humanoid in the future, and this is what DALL-E came up with. So with that image in mind, then, who is ChatGPT to you, right? What does this tool give you, and what are the pluses and the minuses, the pros and the cons? So on the positive side, these tools are great because they will never get tired of you asking lots and lots of questions and iterating different types of questions and asking for more details on questions, right? So it's a sort of a never-ending sort of point of contact who's going to answer the questions that you have. On top of that, these tools obviously span such a breadth of knowledge that you can draw from that as you're thinking about your career next step. Whatever the question that you have, whatever the focus area that you might be interested in from a career perspective, ChatGPT may have an answer to the question, or different types of answers to the question that can help you. What about the cons, right? The cons are that as a tool, obviously, there are no moral compasses that guide this tool, right? And what I mean by that is it's just providing information. It's trained to provide information. It's trained to respond to queries. It doesn't necessarily filter through that on a sort of a high level basis. And so a lot of the information that you might get can sound great, but it's made up to a certain extent. It's not based on a reality as we know it as a sort of a lived experience. It's just information that's brought together. And so what that means is that you're always going to have to be careful that what the information that you're getting from a tool like this, you spend some time and ask yourself, is this accurate? Does this sound right? Is this coming from a source that I might know? Because you don't know where ChatGPT gets its information from. It just appears from nowhere. The other side of it is, and this is sort of the more philosophical side, is as you are engaging with this platform, you will be sharing information, you'll be asking questions. Now, any information that you share, you upload your resume, as I'll show you in a few moments. That information now exists in the sort of the databases of a tool like this. And so if you're happy to share this information overtly and have this tool utilize that to be part of its language model and share that information with other people in different forms, that's great. If you don't want to give your information away so that a large corporation can make billions off that type of information in the future, then obviously that's something that you can play around with and figure out what's going on. So you have to sort of come up with your own philosophical boundaries or ethical boundaries as to how you engage. You don't have to engage with any of these tools, but I'm going to show you a few best practices that might be helpful. I asked ChatGPT what it could do, or what type of role it would play in terms of the job search. And what I liked from this answer in particular was the fact that it described itself as a virtual mentor, right? It's not going to give you information that you should sort of follow directly, but you can pose questions to it, and it will reflect on those questions with you and give you some insight into what you're thinking and some suggestions for other approaches to take, or more nuanced approaches to take. So don't expect ChatGPT to have all the answers where you just say, tell me what to do. Obviously, it's hard for us to know what we should do, but think of it as a mentor where you're reflecting on things that you are thinking of doing or trying to create a strategy around those things. That's, I think, where these tools can be most helpful. So keep that in mind as we're going through that. Now, what I'm going to do as I sort of go through this presentation is I'm going to show you some prompts that I came up with and some answers to those prompts. Now, the answers themselves, you don't have to look at all the text. Those are just illustrations of what the types of answers that we're going to get from this tool are going to look like. But the prompts are the things that I sort of want you to focus on as we go through this. Key to the way that I think people can benefit from AI tools is not to create original content, right? You never want to reach out and say, can you write me a cover letter for this application? Or tell me how I should present myself to an alumni when networking, right? Because the tool doesn't know you, definitely doesn't know you as well as you know yourself, but doesn't really have any information other than what you give it. So the best thing to do is to give it information and refine and iterate that information. You can ask it to say, how can I say this better? What are different ways of saying this? That's going to be key. The other type of prompt that I find really helpful is rather than just saying, can you give me an example of, is to say, give me 5 examples, give me 10 examples, give me 27 examples, right? And just force the tool to sort of give you different variations on a theme, because that's going to give you the opportunity to brainstorm, right? You're going to see different words, different ways of saying things, or different approaches that you could take. So, don't stop with a single, give me an example, put a number there and just sort of keep asking the system to sort of respond to you. Okay, let's jump in then to some of these things. We're going to cover these sort of 5 areas. These are the general steps for any job search process, the career development steps that we talk about here a lot at Career Services. For my title sheets here, I asked, I think it was the Adobe AI tool to come up with with images for this. So I said career exploration at a university, and it has someone walking through the watery part of a university. I'm sure that means something. I don't know what it means, but there you go, career exploration. What does someone in X role do, right? So a lot of us, have knowledge of a certain number of career fields, but as you're exploring your options beyond what you know, sometimes you just don't know what it is to be an X, a consultant, a financial analyst, a nonprofit communications specialist, right? Whatever that is. So these are great prompts to just give you some general background information into what these roles entail, what some of the skills are that come from these roles. So what does a sustainability analyst do at an environmental consulting firm? Now, I've done this type of prompt with my role here at Career Services, and what I got from the system was actually fairly accurate to how I would describe my role, right? So in the boundaries of my knowledge, the tool did a great job of matching that. This isn't going to be everything, and it's not going to be everything at every organization, but it's definitely going to give you some background information that I think is going to be helpful. The next step to that are, what are the skills that you need to be this thing, right? So you've asked it what it is, what are some of the things that you do as that, but what are the skills, the specific skill sets that you might rely on if you are in one of these roles, right? So in this case, to work as a researcher in the biotech industry. Now, again, these are sort of foundational, high-level statements right now, but they are there to remind you that these are the skills that you need to highlight in your resume, talk about in your cover letter, identify stories for in your interviews. So these questions are good, just to make sure that you have a long list of skills that you are saying to yourself, have I illustrated that? Obviously, you're going to pull from the job description too, but this foundational information, I think, can be helpful. But then dig deeper, right? What are the particular software packages or tools that enable me to do this thing, to use this skill? So what visualization software platforms are critical for a researcher in a pharma role, right? And so then it's going to give me some of these tools that are out there. Now, again, these aren't necessarily going to be things that you don't know about, but if you are thinking about a career moving forward and you have let's say you're a PhD student, you have a couple of years left at Penn and you haven't touched on one of these platforms, then maybe there's an opportunity to build skills in that, knowing that these things might be valuable in the fields that you're out there. Again, you can look at job descriptions. They're going to tell you if those things are sought after, but this is a nice way of digging deeper into some of these areas. What I see a lot of in job descriptions are words that are very industry specific. You might call them jargon words, words that mean something in that industry but don't mean something in another field. And so sometimes when people are applying for roles and they're sort of matching their skills, they come across a word like cross-functional, must the ability to work cross-functionally, right? You see it a lot in biotech and industry. And if you don't really know what that word means, it's going to be hard for you to create an example, an illustration of that skill in your resume, or to be able to talk about that in the interview, right? So you really must be able to identify what these terms mean. Networking is one way of doing that. You reach out to someone in a role and you say, what does cross-functional mean to you? But this is a sort of the passive way of doing it with an AI tool, right? So what does cross-functional mean, right? And now you have a better sense of what this term means. You're able then to think about examples that you may have used that sound similar to that or look similar to that, and you can talk about those in the resume. You may still not use the word cross-functional because it won't make sense in a sort of an academic environment to describe that, but you can describe the essence of what that means. Now, here's an example of then sort of asking for 10 examples. What does 10 examples of cross-functional look like in the tech industry, right? And now I get a sense of what this could look like in terms of different teams, different stratifications within the organizations, things that I might need to be aware of if someone says to me in an interview, give me an example of how you've worked cross-functionally, or, do you have a sense of what our organization system looks like and how you might engage as someone in this role, right? And now I have a better sense because I sort of have a visual map of what these things look like from a cross-functional perspective. So again, asking for numbers of things is really helpful. What are trends? Trends questions are hard, obviously, because in the free version, the September 2021 is sort of the where it stopped in terms of the data that you have access to. So the world continues to change, even if the inputs to the system have not been updated. But it might give you some general insights into trends that are out there. And what you can do with those trends is you can take those to one of your networking conversations with someone who's in the role, and you can say, my sense is that this is a trend in this field. Is that accurate, right? And so you're demonstrating some knowledge, but also then clarifying that with a person who's actually in the field who might have a better sense of what those trends are. So be cautious with trends, but certainly you can leverage those as you're thinking about what have been some of the changes, and then to think about what those might look like moving forward. Trends questions are important because some of the questions that you might get in an interview would be, what do you see as some of the key changes in this field over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And so you should be able to have an answer to those types of questions. And this is one way that you might approach that. Okay, let's move on to networking. So again, I asked for a networking image. We're still in the watery part of the fountain area for a university, but it's a different university. But I like this one. I like the interconnectedness of the ropes here. It's very networking-like. So from a networking perspective, LinkedIn is a key tool, obviously. And one of the things that you want to get right on your LinkedIn profile is your headline, because after your photo, that's the first thing that people find out about you. And my suggestion, obviously, is to move away from the role that you play. So if your LinkedIn headline says graduate student, University of Pennsylvania, that doesn't really tell the reader much about you, right? That is the role that you're in right now, but it doesn't tell me about those skills, experiences, knowledge, passions that you have. So how do you create a headline? Because it's not always easy to sort of come out of the blue and have a headline that you like. Well, one approach is that you could take the summary that you've already written on LinkedIn. If you have a summary, I have a very long one, and I asked ChatGPT to make 5 versions of a LinkedIn headline, right? Just to sort of see what it came up with. So on this page, my one that I came up with is at the top, and then these are the 5 versions that it came up with based on that summary that I had written for LinkedIn, right? And you can see that there's a lot of overlap here, different variations on a theme. It's not that any one of these is going to be the thing that you want to write, but they are going to sort of help you brainstorm different parameters of what you could highlight in your headline. And obviously that headline wants to feel the most relevant to the fields that you're most excited about in terms of your career next steps. But this is a great way of brainstorming, information that's already out there in your LinkedIn summary that you could then say, who am I and how can I present myself in an engaging way? You could also do that with your resume. Now, I uploaded my resume to ChatGPT. It has that already, and so I'll continue to do that. But I said, here's my resume. Come up with a LinkedIn headline, come up with 5 versions of a LinkedIn headline based on my resume. Now, these are different. And the reason that these are sort of different from my previous one is that my LinkedIn summary is general and broad and captures different elements of my professional identity. My resume, probably I use to apply for the job that I'm in right now, is focused on this job. And so the narrative that it's created here is much more about the role that I'm in right now and the role that I may want moving forward. And so these are, much more focused on the career development side of things as opposed to the animal behavior side of things, which is what my PhD is in. So again, different ways of brainstorming different identities as you're going through this tool. Networking is hard because it can be very unstructured. Where do you start? How do you know you're making progress? So one of the prompts that I think is sometimes helpful is make a detailed networking plan for the next 12 months, for someone who's an X who's interested in doing Y. And then you can sort of get this nice overview. And of course, for every one of these suggestions, you can say, provide more details on the first 3 months, right? So this is the real benefit of the AI tools, is that you ask one question, and then you keep asking more and more questions, and it focuses in on the answer it already gave, right? Google something, you get one piece of information, you can't then Google your Google query, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? So this one makes much more sense in terms of asking a question, getting an answer, and then asking more details about that answer. Here, the second arrow, join marketing-related professional organizations. These are probably true organizations, but again, you'd want to clarify that that is the case. Throughout the year, it says leverage university resources, workshops, and meet with advisors. So I appreciate the shout out from ChatGPT there. And again, it provided a list of organizations that you can double check actually exist and are true and are helpful. Again, through your actual networking with people, you can ask them how helpful they found those types of organizations as part of their own job search. But a very nice sort of way of sort of going through that. It recommended as part of the networking plan to have informational interviews, right? So then the next question is, well, what should I ask someone in an informational interview? And now you have some suggestions here. Each one of these questions, you could say, what are, a couple of variations of how I can ask this question? Or I'll be meeting with an X person. What types of questions should I ask that person, right? And so, again, there will be variations on a theme, but you can really get a nice, confident set of questions that you can be asking just by iterating through this process so that you're never at a loss in terms of what information is going to be helpful to you. Resumes and cover letters and AI. Now, this image I think is great. Resume writing was the prompt in this one. But I had the option to choose a style, and I said choose yarn as a style. It didn't really come across that, but it did provide a ball of yarn here to sort of echo that. So I appreciate the yarn input there. So in this case, what I did is I said, here's my resume. What are the 5 main takeaways that a recruiter from the learning and development department of a tech company would walk away with having read this resume? So this is sort of me getting insight on how someone else could read my resume, right? What are those high-level things that they would take away? Because what happens when you spend so much time on your resume is that your brain gets so fed up with reading it that it can't actually give you any good insight about the resume because it's just so fed up with reading the same words over and over again. So you get what you might call resume blindness. You can't really determine if it's good or bad. So putting it into a tool like this and saying, what are the main themes is great, because if those aren't the themes that you would want someone to take away, then maybe there's more work to do to sort of make sure that those themes rise to the top and people can see those, right? So this is just another way of getting sort of a feedback on your resume from a third party that isn't you, because your brain's fed up with reading a resume, to allow you to reflect on some of those things. You can do that with a job description too, right? So in this case, I took a coordinator role from the Center of Professional Learning at Penn, and I threw the job description in and I said, what are the main themes from this job description that a candidate should respond to in their application materials? So the first one, commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, and collaboration. Second one, experience managing operations. Now, obviously, what you can do is you can take your customized version of a resume that you made for this type of role, and you can take the job and you can say, summarize the job, and you can say, summarize the resume, and you can see if those takeaways match. Because that's really the goal of the resume, right? Is to match the sort of the skills and the experience that are sought after in the job description. So this is a really easy, fast way of doing that and getting feedback from this tool as to how well your main takeaways resonate. In that previous job, it said that DEI was a main focus. So then the question I asked is, provide 5 examples of bullet points that I can use that demonstrate a commitment to DEI. Now, these things are examples, right? These are not necessarily things that I have done. Now, I could put in my resume and say, what in my resume, supports DEI, and probably it would pull out a few of those examples and allow me to see those more clearly. But after this prompt, at the end of this prompt, what it did say is that these are examples. Think about whether these match your experiences and then adapt them to your experiences. So again, it's not giving you what to say. It doesn't know you well enough to do that, but it's giving you examples of the types of things that would illustrate those skills in action. Other things that you can do with cover letters and resumes, right? So if English is not your first language and you struggle with a cover letter, create your own cover letter, make sure you have your content, and then say, make this letter read more naturally, right? And it will take off some of the rough edges and it will make sure that what you are trying to communicate comes across clearly. I think that's a perfectly appropriate way of using a tool like this. You shouldn't lose your own voice though, right? So the way that you speak, the way that you communicate should still be the primary aspect of your letter. If it doesn't sound like you, if you're reading a letter and you say to yourself, this doesn't sound like me, then tweak it, right? Continue to tweak it to keep it sounding like you. But sometimes the grammar side of things and sometimes what might seem like an awkwardly worded sentence can be fixed easily by a tool like this. Again, with cover letters, you can say, what are the main themes? With cover letters, you can say, help me tell a story about this experience that fits into a cover letter. the first part of the first sort of paragraph of a cover letter, when I talk about cover letters with students and postdocs, is usually a nice overarching summary of the main points that you're going to cover in the rest of the letter. So you can sort of write your letter and then say, what are those main points, right? And help you craft that high impact opening paragraph, but don't let AI write your cover letter or write your resume. Use it to sort of iterate through versions that you already have. Interviewing. I hope this was a nice clay version of interviewing, very appropriate here, what interviewing could look like. What's difficult with interviewing is telling the stories in behavioral interviews, right? These STAR stories: situation, task, action, result. So what I did here is I took one of the sort of the main bullet points from a resume and I said, help me make a STAR story out of this. And then ChatGPT broke it down into those different situations. It's going to iterate on that. So you still have to go back through and make sure that what it's saying is accurate, right? It's going to sort of make up things that didn't actually happen. But it's an easy way to begin to create structured answers to interviews that you might use when you're sort of telling stories about these experiences. So, this is just a nice way of, again, getting insight or getting different versions of what you've done to be able to create narratives for different types of roles that you're applying to. So I like this idea of helping you tell stories based on things that you've done. I created a sort of a script, as it were, for a tell me about yourself question for an interview. I don't think you should create a script, but I created one and I threw it into ChatGPT and I said, what feedback would you give for this answer to tell me about yourself? The reason I put lies here is because it said that my answer provides a comprehensive overview of my experience. And obviously ChatGPT doesn't actually know what my experience is, so how does it know that it's comprehensive, right? It only has what I told it. But it does give you some things to think about, right? In terms of the structure, in terms of the order, just to help you reflect on these answers in a way that, you can't really do in your own head on your own. Certainly you can do that with us here at Career Services, but this is another way of just sort of saying, how does this sound? How does this flow? What comes to the top for my answer, right? But again, it doesn't know you. It's just a tool that has what you give it. Negotiating is a challenging one in terms of most people don't have a lot of experience negotiating. And so there's a lot of hesitancy and sometimes anxiety about this process. Now, what you can do on this tool, obviously you can ask for salary. And again, it's calling out the fact that it doesn't have all the information because it stopped input from 2021 on this free version. Again, this might give you a general sort of number that you could then clarify with alumni, right? You could reach out and say, from my research, I know that an entry-level salary is in this range. Does that sound accurate to you, right? So that you're always coming with information as opposed to just asking questions without any information. So this is one way that you can sort of approach this. What are 5 ways to ask for a higher salary from a recruiter, right? And so these are strategies in this case that it's saying, here's how you might position yourself for asking for a higher salary. What I actually wanted when I put this prompt in was, what should I say, right? What do I say to a recruiter if I'm asking for money? So that was my next prompt. And then what this does is provide you some of that language that you might use to actually ask for more money. Because how often do you get to ask for more money on a day-to-day basis, right? So we're not very practiced in doing that. So these are just examples of what you could say. And then you take these and you adapt them and you refine them and you add to them and all sorts of things. Creating sort of practice scenarios, that's another thing that you can do, right? I'm negotiating for this role. Walk me through the steps that I could take to do this. This is just sort of, again, brainstorming and practicing with this non-corporeal entity out there to help you do that. And then as part of this, you can create a scenario where you're sort of walking through that, and it gives you sort of structure and steps that you can follow to make sure that you are, doing this in a structured, well thought out way. It even came up with a sort of a sample response. Now, it came up with an email version of this. The recommendations that you'll probably get around negotiating is that they should be in person, as in, real time, not necessarily in person, but real time, not by email. But some of the things that came up with this in this email are still some of the things that you can say, right? You wouldn't say these exact words in this exact way, but it gives you a structure for how you can negotiate or how you can create a strategy for negotiation. The last thing that I want to sort of focus on is the fact that I'm telling you how to use ChatGPT, but what you can do obviously is ask ChatGPT how to use ChatGPT. That's sort of the magic of the tool, as it were. So hopefully this provides you with some foundations for what you can be doing, but it's an iterative tool that allows you to continue to ask questions and drill down deeper and ask for different variations and themes. And so I hope you'll do that.